producer is someone who comes up with an idea and then has to figure out how to do it.
Somebody who buys material or develops material, hires a director, finds the financing, whether it's a studio or it's independent.
The amount of money it's going to take to make the movie, how the money is going to be spent, where the money is going to come from.
Get the movie stars, assemble a crew, go on location.
Oversee the production, oversee the post-production, and get involved in setting up the distribution and the marketing of the film.
Really what we do on a daily basis is we try to take ideas and take them all the way through release.
Well, you know, what a producer does is they move things to the next step.
A producer is somebody who has an omnivorous set of skills.
You're part psychologist, part deal maker, part motivational speaker, sometimes part hard ass. You have to figure out how you take your idea, get it from A to Z, and get it on the air.
You have to be investment banker, you have to be a businessman, you have to be creative, you have to wear many hats in order to be a producer.
A producer is generally the person who decides something should be a movie or TV show or whatever, and he or she, from that idea, does everything possible to produce it.
Making a movie is literally jumping off a cliff with a budget and a script, and you have to get everything landed with a parachute by the end, or you're in trouble.
If you were building a house, a producer would be the contractor.
I think a producer is a traffic cop. A producer is a person who gets a lot of different people together, gets them all looking in the right direction.
A producer is like the, if you will, the conductor of an orchestra.
I liken it to a real estate developer. A producer does everything a real estate developer does, every single step. And at the end, he or she has a movie or a TV show instead of a shopping center or a condominium.
A producer is the person who bears the ultimate responsibility for the project that's undertaken, whether it's a television or film project. I think ultimately it reflects on the producer is how well did he make something.
There are a number of different kinds of producers. I think there are people who generate their own material, ideas that come out of their own heads or ideas that they read in articles or books. They develop them into screenplays on their own and also with writers. So that's one type of producer who really controls the material from beginning to end in that way. Then of course there are others who a studio has a property and they come in and they help put that together in the very beginning, and then finally there are producers who are brought in, more commonly known as line producers, who are brought in to do the physical production of the movie.
There's all kinds of producers. There's a line producer who is the nuts and bolts guy. He's the one that hires the people that bring the lighting equipment in, the sound equipment in, the transportation. That's called a line producer. And they're responsible for the budget and going over the budget with the producer and the director in the studio. And they're responsible for the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of everything. Then there's an executive producer who oftentimes just gets a credit for either having some kind of involvement, but not formal involvement. And then the producer usually, that's the coveted role, if you will. And those are usually the people that have actually developed the material, found the material, got it going, found the director, put the whole thing together and gone to make the movie. Those are usually reserved for those people. It's kind of the creme de la creme of the credits.
Producing in television has changed a lot. When I first started, there was no cable, there was no Discovery Channel. There was ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. So when we were developing shows, I started the company in 1984, so this is our 29th year in production. There were very few people to sell ideas to. As a producer, when you come up with an idea, you always have to think, okay, where am I going to sell this? It could be a great idea, but unless you make a sale, no one will see it. So back in the day, in the 80s, selling these ideas were limited because you only had maybe 4 or 5 buyers. Today, cable has 500 channels. We right now probably sell to 30, 40 buyers. From Discovery, A&E, History, MSNBC. So we have much better chance of taking an idea and getting it on the air.
I had, like everyone, my own path to becoming a producer. I think as many producers as there are as many paths. As a dean at the University of North Carolina for 5 years, and students would ask me that question, I would say the same thing to them, that you come to it with unique skills and with unique hopes and desires. Mine began, I was pre-med in college, and thought that I was going to become a doctor and maybe go into politics as a doctor. And I took a course in my sophomore year, end of my sophomore year, from a man named Jules Dundies. We became very close friends after the class itself. And Jules said to me, he was very kind, he said, "You're too nice of a person to run for political office, but you can affect the way the world thinks in your films and in television. So think about making a career in that way." And I love this man. He taught me so much. And it was a huge change in my life. My father was a doctor, so there was a lot of controversy at home.
I picked up a regular 8 camera when I was 11 or 12 years old, and was sort of fascinated by this camera that had no film in it, and convinced my father to give me some film for the camera. And I went out to a duck pond and I shot a bunch of ducks. And when I came home and projected the ducks on screen, I was like, that's awesome. I love that. Close-ups of ducks and wide shots of ducks and tracking the duck. And I realized that ability to photograph something and get it on screen and tell a story was really something that connected to me. My business partner, Chris Columbus, we met first day of school at NYU. And we spent 4 years making films. So when we got out here, he was already working for a studio as a writer, and I was trying to be a writer and trying to be a director, trying to figure out how to get people to see my films. Directors need to have very singular focus. You know, for a year and a half, 2 years, you focus on one story, telling one story. Producers get to tell many different stories and incorporate, many different creative elements and people. And it happens in the course of a day.
I was on the U.S. ski team as a freestyle skier, and I started doing ski movies. And then I started doing regular movies, and I was an actor and young in life. And I always wanted to be in the movie business, but I ended up in the family real estate business in Arizona. And I learned finance, and I learned how to put deals together, and so I had great training to be a movie producer.
At a certain point, after a couple of years in my father's tiny textile business, which I hated, I said, how do we get out of here, and what do I like? I always liked not only films and TV, I always liked literature, dealing with ideas and words. So I decided I wanted to be a producer.
I've always wanted to be a producer. That's all I've ever wanted to do. I remember in 5th grade, you used to get in my school, they'd give us a form, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I would write producer without even really knowing what it meant. And like a lot of people my age, many of us started in the training programs at one of the agencies. I went into the training program at William Morris a month after I graduated college. And that was where I started.
I'm probably one of the persons that can say they're actually a child of the film business. My parents, when I was 4 years old, were making short films. They were shooting pieces of documentary-style material, and I actually rode an alligator in one of those movies when I was 4. I also remembered being taken with them to Water Street in London and meeting with the heads of the distribution company that was buying their movies, because I think they couldn't find a babysitter. So I was in that world, watching the movies in a movie theater at 4 years old, seeing myself ride on a screen, seeing my parents do things which felt magical. So from that point on, I knew I wanted to make spells with cameras. And then the rest of my life has been trying to figure out how to do that and not be too stressed.
To make a film, you have to have a lot of departments. You have to have the sound department, otherwise you wouldn't be hearing me right now. You have to have the lighting department, otherwise you wouldn't be seeing me. You have to have the makeup department, which I don't have any on, the hair department. You have to have the wardrobe department, depending on whatever the wardrobe is at that time period. You have to have the set, the chairs, the tables, the walls, so that's the production designer. You have to have the editing department so that you can cut me off when you want to and put the story together. The editors and his or her group. Marketing department to market your movie. There's a department pretty much for every single thing in the film. The music, the sound, the noises all around you. There's people for every single thing that goes into it. And hopefully when you watch the movie, it's all seamless. You don't realize that there's a department for each thing.
You have the cast, you have the director, you have the writers, you have the producer, casting director, all those people who are really involved from the very beginning in the making of the movie. Then there's the production side, and in the production side, you have the assistant directors, you have the unit production manager. Then there's the areas called the grips and electric. There's a huge department of design, production design, art direction, construction, the designing of the sets, and what you call the strike, the tearing down of the sets. Then of course there's transportation, so the camera itself, cinematography. You have a cinematographer, you have the gaffer who really is looking after the lighting, you have the camera operator who's actually operating the camera itself, and then a whole host of people under that group who are moving things around, as I mentioned, the electricians, and then also the camera department. That's a big budget area. A number of other smaller areas, like props, where I'm holding a pen and the director and the actor may want to make sure that they have a certain kind of pen that I'm holding in this shot.
If you start with writing, you go to directing. Director is sort of the maestro once the picture starts, but you'll have a production designer who will design the look of the picture, a costume, designer who will obviously do the costumes and hair and makeup, oversee all that. You'll have a director of photography who's responsible for the visual look of the picture. In today's world, your VFX supervisor is almost as important as anybody else, and somebody in charge of music, a composer, and it's really those key bodies, along with a line producer who will come in to break down all the scenes in the movie and figure out how a shooting schedule and containing the costs, figuring out the costs, and then containing those costs.
And then there's, of course, post-production. And in post-production, the biggest area in my more recent movies is visual effects. And often, the funny thing is, that's pretty much half of the entire budget. Then, of course, editing and your whole editing team, and there's a visual effects editing team, and there's a regular editing team for the regular film, the storytellers, the composers, and the musicians, and the music in the movie. And then lastly, sound effects. In the Smurfs movies, we have something else called 3D. And 3D typically adds a big chunk, maybe $10 million to the budget on top of everything else. And then you have a huge element that's not in our budget, but I promise you it's in someone else's budget, as the marketing of the movie. And that can range anywhere from $20 to $100 million.
So every network has a different price scale. There are the networks up here like HBO, Turner, TNT, even Spike. They probably will pay upwards over $500,000–600,000 per hour. Then you have networks kind of in the mid-range, the A&Es, Discoveries, they're probably in the $300,000 to $500,000 per episode. And then you have the really low-end networks. They're the networks where the budgets are so low, we like to say, do you want audio with that show? Because they're so low, all right? So when we sell a show to them, we have to have the expectation. We have to be able to produce it, If we sell them a show that is really expensive to do, we're wasting our time because they're not going to break the mold of what they can afford to pay. So when we go out to pitch, if a network likes it, we kind of know the ballpark of what they're going to pay, and then we can build a budget. We reverse engineer a number into that budget. And so we usually try to go to the highest networks because the budget's going to be bigger, but sometimes in reality the show that we're pitching doesn't fit them, it fits better another network, and that's how we figure it out.
Making a movie is a difficult process. The producer can be on the picture for a long time before a director, is on it. So in the case of a picture we're about to make, I bought the rights to a book and then started hiring writers trying to adapt the book. Ultimately ended up writing the screenplay myself, ended up finding investors for the pictures and then subsidies so that we had enough money to make the picture, and hired the director, and now we're hiring the key technical staff, and we should shoot the movie in April. And it'll be out in theaters in spring of 2015, a film called The Moon and the Sun. So that's a film that I'll have spent 11 years on by the time it gets to the screen. In a case of where people think of the auteur theory, the director who will have an instrumental role in what that picture actually looks like and how good it is, the director will have spent 3 years.
Well, a movie comes together in a different way every time. It's not the same thing that happens. Our company in particular is a company that kind of responds to IP. So for many of our movies, it started with a remake of a title that the studios own, and we would convince them to let us run with that title. Frequently, we would try and build, especially our first movies, around release dates. Once you have a concept or an idea of a movie you want to remake, for us it was just about getting the scripts right and hiring the right director, what we thought was the right director.
There are a lot of different ways that films come together, right? Some films are remakes of old films or remakes of foreign films. That's the simplest thing.
You buy the rights to a book, for example. You hire a screenwriter. You develop the script. You get a director. Then you start casting it. Then you start doing a budget. Then you get distribution, and then you start making the movie.
Sources of stories like comic books, novels, real life things that happen. There are many different ways it happens. I think the most common is the original screenplay. And there, as a producer, I might start with an idea, like when we made the movie Philadelphia. Philadelphia started as an idea. Let's do a movie about AIDS. We found a story, we researched the story, we got a script written, a studio came on to finance the script being written, and then we were off to the races.
It's so difficult to get a film off the ground nowadays, especially in what I do. I do a lot of co-production deals, and I'll do co-production deals with other countries, so that it may be a Canadian-UK co-production deal, in that we can get incentives out of the UK and incentives out of Canada. And so we have to pair up a production company in the UK with one in Canada in order to get the film off the ground. And I have multiple examples of that. I've produced about 50 films, and just about every one of them is some sort of co-production deal that involves multiple producers, multiple production companies from different countries.
There are several companies that provide financing, and each company that provides financing along the way wants to get a credit. You can have a company that works on it, or is hired, or is brought in to work on it, and they want a company credit as well as individual credits. And finally, you can have managers or other people that would ask for their companies to be credited as well.
Multiple production companies are on a lot of pictures because that's how the picture gets made. It may not be that they did anything. It may just be that if I wanted a major director, that director usually has a production company of his own. That means his production company will come on. Sometimes an actor will also have his own production company, and if you want them, you have to pay his manager or his production company to come on. And again, everybody's adding into the system. They may or may not be having a major impact on the picture itself.
The object, the exercise, to get someone to put up money for your movie. And sometimes it comes from multiple places. In the old days, the studios did most of it. But these days, they cobble them together. And whoever puts up money, I guess, becomes a producer. Indeed, that's sort of a sore spot with producers, in that a producing credit is fungible. You can negotiate for it. You can negotiate a writer's credit, can't negotiate a director's credit, an actor's credit. Producer's credit can be negotiated.
Multiple producers are credited on movies. Used to be unlimited. Now the Academy has pretty much said, and the Producers Guild is pretty much limiting it to 3 producers, or at least 3 producers that they'll acknowledge in terms of the Academy Awards and things like that.
I think it's great. I mean, I think you know, when I was running a studio, we allowed a lot of those credits to get fudged. And you know what a director does, you know what a writer does. Even when there's 5 writers, you know they all wrote significantly on the picture. But if you look at 18 producer credits, you have no idea what anybody did. And so what the PGA has done is try and clarify it so that when somebody gets the PGA bullet on their name, it means that they had a significant impact on the picture. Not just money, not just rights, but actually, you know, in having a significant role in the making of the picture itself.
I was thrilled about the PGA mark and a little bit involved in that, and I'm really happy that we have it because it really delineates the group of us that actually go make the movie from the beginning to the end versus the people that are involved but aren't full-fledged real producers. And I think it really protects us, and I'm thrilled that the studios have embraced it. It's a great thing for us, and I think it will make everybody think twice at Academy Award time what their involvement was or wasn't.
The message to me about that Producers Guild mark is, we've been sort of shat upon for so long, we fight it unsuccessfully. This at least can distinguish those of us who do the work from those who either got in through putting up money or being a representative of the star or something like that.
I think it's great that the PGA is making producers accountable. Something that's always frustrating to me is when I'll look at a poster on a movie that I produced and there's a name there and I never saw that person on set or involved in the movie. And so producing is a really hard thing to do, and it takes a long time to actually produce a movie from the beginning to end. And I think that there should be some criteria by which if your name is going to be on the poster that you did the work that got you there.